Isaiah and I want to talk about something very serious. We'll call it, I don't know if I would say a parasite or a disease in the jump training space, but it's bad. It's really bad, and there's a lot of evidence in support of it. A lot of people that like it, but we think it's a parasite and it's leaching away our joint health, and that is isometrics. It is the not only probably the most detrimental thing for our cartilage we found to be the case, despite joint contact area, but also just our mental health. It is probably, and we're not talking about isometrics in the sense of 70% of MVC for 45 seconds or more. We're talking max 100%.
The full load.
Yeah, a full measure, if you will, as they say in Breaking Bad. Not a half measure, a full measure of effort, intensity, neurological, what do you want to call it? Like stimuli. And that is the max effort isometrics at your most powerful position, which is basically 50% of the length tension relationship, i.e., where you have the most cross bridging. And it is, it's rough. So, reason being, I did them yesterday for the first time, and I've had Isaiah do them in the past. And usually I bleed them in the form of waves. Logic behind it, you get great tendon adaptation because you're meeting the strain requirements and the stress requirements for adaptation, i.e., you're getting long hold of very high force, which means you're going to stimulate the collagen to synthesize more collagen, or the tenocytes to synthesize more collagen, which is great. That's what we want. We want to stiffen the tendon. It's awesome. However, we talked about this yesterday, but there is a cost benefit analysis to most of the things that you do. So whether that's a super maximal eccentric, whether it is a super maximal, we'll call it maximal isometric, there is a cost benefit analysis. So the benefit of doing this exercise is that you get really high type 2 fiber recruitment. You get great motor recruitment, meaning you just recruit more muscles during it, as many as you basically can, which is awesome. That's what we want to do when we jump high. You get the tendon to stress and strain and get great tendon adaptation really, really quickly. And you can strengthen the specific position that you want to jump higher, which is amortization. So in Isaiah's case, this would be like 90 at the knee joint, roughly 90 degrees of flexion. So it can be a great tool for improving performance, and there's limited to minimal fatigue related to damage to the actual muscle fibers. Now, there's some newer stuff about like calcium ion related fatigue, but traditionally we would think of eccentric work causing the most amount of damage.
Talking about what is it? Contraction,
calcium
excitation?
Ion, contraction,
coupling failure.
Coupling fatigue failure, yes. And soreness and some other stuff. I mean, it was traditionally thought that if you did a lot of eccentrics, you would rip the myosin heads off, and that would essentially cause damage. And then if you did isometrics, that wouldn't, because you're just attaching, detaching, and reattaching the myosin heads, and there's no movement, so you're probably not causing damage to the actual myofibrils. Now there's some stuff related to like calcium ion related fatigue, and that probably does happen a good or a great deal during isometric activity. Maybe not as much as eccentrics because there's not as much force. But nonetheless, it can still cause less fatigue than maybe like a stretch shortening cycle or something of that nature. So it has a benefit there as well. And coaches have long used them to maintain performance in season for that reason, specifically for like jumpers, sprinters, where they don't want to induce a lot of fatigue and they want to maintain a lot of output. So Isaiah, we've done them now. I've used them as a way to get the former adaptations, not necessarily like in season or anything, but these max effort isometrics. Tell me a little bit about your experience.
I am sick and tired, and something needs to change. So the
people need to understand that this is a problem. This is a problem in our society.
Listen here. There's been too much information being propagated on social media about isometrics being the meta, but it's not.
They're not. We have a better solution. We're going to go through that at the end of this podcast. Yeah, I know you're telling your dog to shut up, and it probably sounds like this. Dog!
Yeah. Be quiet, dog. Yeah. Can you hear him barking?
I can whenever you were yelling, yes, but obviously not when you mute it. Then no, I can't. But Yeah. So I think with your experience with this, talk about the parasite that is Isometrics to your joint, your knee joint.
I've done them 2 times. Dos veces. It's 2 times in Spanish.
Oh, thank you. I know what caca
Better
means,
than
by the way.
Duolingo out here. We're better than Duolingo, baby.
I don't know about all
Yeah.
that. All that.
So I've done them 2 times. Last year when I did them, guess what happened? It was leading up to the 50.5 madness or shortly after, but I was jumping real high. Real
You're
high.
jumping real high. There's some
Yeah.
benefits here.
Very high. Second time I did them last month, I was also jumping real high.
Consequence?
But my cartilage was eaten away. It was grinding. I just was grinding that cartilage away, baby, while I was doing those isometrics. Split squat, even better. Split squat position. Yeah, grinding on the front leg and the back leg. Just ripping that cartilage apart. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's kind of like if you can imagine taking like 2 erasers and just like pushing them together as hard as possible until they crumble. Is that like kind of what it felt like?
Yeah, they're going like with the 2 erasers.
Yeah, like as fast as possible. Yeah, just rub it. No, I can't, but that's because of voice isolation.
Damn it. But yeah, it flared up my PFP both times. And leading in, I actually don't remember how I felt leading into the PFP. I mean, I was gonna say the PFP cycle, the PFP destroyer. Leading in, I don't remember how I felt, but I remember it got very flared up last year when I did it. The chondromalacia. And then
we did move out of the painful positions, by the way. Like I would also consider having him do it at a different position, but I was like, nah, like that might bother your PFP. So I did tell him to go to different ranges of motion where it didn't hurt. It's just that it didn't matter. And that was for 2 reasons. 1, decrease the force so that he doesn't shred it. And 2, to increase the contact area between your joints. Because if you have more area, you have less pressure, and that's good for the joint. But despite that,
it hurt. And this year when I did it,
mind you, we've built up to this. We've built up to this with max strength work.
Yeah.
This is not like we just jumped into this.
For context, leading into this month, felt healthiest I have felt in terms of my cartilage, like in a long time. Like I could do standing jumps, I could do max effort squats on the belt squat, which puts my knee at a bad position for PFP. Was still able to do that. Like I was in a really good spot, and I went from that to by the end of the cycle. Well, not even the end of the cycle. At week 3, I couldn't do it anymore. We had to stop it. No more isometrics.
What's interesting is it did only take a week and a half to bounce back. I will say that. So to its credit, maybe we loaded the cartilage and we allowed it to adapt. I'm sure that's what a lot of the zealots in 2015 would have said. They said you got to load the tissue to get it to adapt. But this was beyond the capacity. And I think Isaiah and I at this point have enough experience where it's like we can just feel it and we know what the timelines are for recovery. And when it's not bouncing back within like 48 hours, it ain't looking good.
And I can tell when
shit ain't sweet.
And I can tell when I'm at an appropriate level of loading where it feels like the tissue is adapting and I can bounce back in 2 days and hit the same workout or a harder workout. But I was taking steps backwards. Like for reference, I'll do squats sometimes and I can work through a little bit of pain and I know I'll feel better the next day versus the isometrics. It was just too much.
You know what's so funny about this is that we have advocated for isometrics since 2018, which I have video evidence of, by the way. Isaiah and I found it the other day on my phone. Maybe I'll show it to you guys at some point. It was basically like a letter to myself, a love letter to myself in the future. And it's now like
a video.
Yeah, it's like 7 years old. I got chills watching it. It was pretty cool. And there was a lot of like old names that if I were to bring up, you guys would be like, oh yeah, I remember that person. Well, I mean, like if you've been in the space for a while. Now the community it's different. It's different people. There's more, specifically with me. There's less relationships than there were in the past in some ways, by choice on my end. And yeah, it's just different. But nonetheless, the isometrics we used to do and still do are 70% in the warm up And those are an appropriate load. They are not above the capacity. Actually, you know what? Before I even get into this, there is a load capacity for every tissue. Every material has a stress strain curve, meaning there are basically no materials that are perfectly elastic. What that means is you apply 1 Newton of force and you get 1 Newton of force back, right? That doesn't exist. Even the ground will give you like, and it's a collision between two objects. So you need two perfectly elastic objects, which I don't I don't think that exists on the planet. I'd have to ask ChatGPT because that's my mentor. He might know what that is. Isaiah, you gonna do that
I'm
for me?
gonna.
Well, yeah. Why don't you ask Chat?
I use the Google AI.
I don't think
ChatGPT's
the Google AI is
nemesis.
better, bro. Don't disrespect ChatGPT like that. But I'm not saying you should like reference ChatGPT for everything in life. But if you have a question like this, I think it would probably find the answer fairly quickly. Is there a perfectly? Are you finding this right now?
I'm asking ChatGPT.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Does a perfectly elastic object exist on Earth? No, a perfectly elastic object does not exist on Earth
Oh,
or anywhere else in the physical universe as far as we know. In physics, perfect elasticity refers to an idealized material that, when deformed, aka compressed, stretched, or bent, returns to its original shape without any loss of energy. This means that the material would have no internal friction or other mechanisms like heat dissipation that convert mechanical energy into other forms of energy like thermal energy.
fact check me, bro. Fact check me.
Yeah.
Every
And then
time.
there's some examples. Rubber, relatively elastic, but loses some energy as heat. Steel can be quite elastic, but will eventually yield and deform permanently under high
Yeah.
enough stress. So that's the
Yeah.
strain curve you were talking about. And then there's something called super elastic materials, like certain alloys that can recover large
Ooh.
strains, but they still aren't perfectly elastic in the strictest sense. I want to look those up. Super elastic materials.
Yeah. Well, let's do
Sounds
that after
cool.
the podcast.
All
But
right.
nonetheless, there is, and specifically in the human body, we are not super alloys. We are not these super elastic materials, right? We are bone, we are tendon, we are
Unless you're
muscle.
T-Dub.
Yeah, unless you're teed up, then you're just this human bouncy ball. But or Donovan. And I mean, don't get me wrong, we have elastic properties, but we are not perfectly, these we can't apply infinite amounts of strain and allow it to cause, like it said with steel, there's a point where it will damage it and it will never return to its previous shape.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we're bioplastic, meaning like we can adapt until we die. But if you exceed the capacity of some of that tissue, it don't come back. You don't tear your Achilles and it just magically heals itself. That doesn't happen, right? If you get a full rupture, you're going underneath a knife, okay? Otherwise, that's going to stay torn. Or if you wear away that cartilage to oblivion all the way down to the bone, that's what you need a hip
Hello,
replacement.
osteoarthritis.
Osteoarthritis, baby. That's in our future for sure.
Yeah,
Fingers
that
crossed.
book that we were reading, me and John bought this book where it had like evidence, research, and all this stuff about all like common injuries. And the end game of most injuries that are jumping related is osteoarthritis. If you have pinching, keep stretching and squatting through that pinching your hips, osteoarthritis. Keep squatting through that PFP and jumping through that PFP, osteoarthritis.
Yep. And we basically realized, like, shoot, this is probably not going to be a good end for all of us. We've accepted our fates and we know how to prolong it. And it's mostly related to symptoms. That's the other part of it, too. Like,
Yeah,
if you manage the symptoms, you're going to be fine
yeah.
generally. Right. But if you just ignore the symptoms, specifically pinching, pain, a lot of pain, not
Stabbing
good.
pain.
Yeah. Stabbing pain feels like a knife is in the joint. You're probably doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And we want to encourage you to not do that, despite what your PT may say. Hopefully your PT doesn't say that, but I would encourage you to not do that. And or your fellow online fitness guru who's going to advocate for stretching to extreme ranges where that may occur at any joint, the ankle,
Yeah.
knee, hip, doesn't matter. So don't do that, or osteoarthritis will set in and you'll be bone on bone, grinding away not only your cartilage, no lubrication there whatsoever, just bone on bone. Just imagine two chicken wings trying to start a fire with two chicken wings. That's what it's going to be like. You like that, Isaiah?
Yeah. Have fun. Have fun.
So, what is our solution for this? Because I've used pauses and
So I
progressions
think
and things like that. I have thoughts. I know you have thoughts. Share your thoughts.
I think if you're, oh, hello, Mello. He has made an
Oh
appearance.
my
on the
goodness, he's so cute though. You
I
wait, put the
think,
mic up. Put the mic up to his face. Is he gonna try to eat it? You can't hear him. I think your settings have to be changed. Oh, I
yeah.
did hear him. I lied.
Nah, I think if you're healthy, then they're worth doing. Just be very careful, listen to your body, and stop doing it if something starts hurting. I think if it does hurt, you might be able to find a position that isn't provocative, which is a solution I told John that could be a potential thing for me is just go into a deep squat, right? Like I can go all the way down and push from there, but you run into the problem of it's not at that ideal half squat
Yeah,
position
like
where
you're losing the amortization benefits potentially, or
yeah,
the strength, the joint specific strength specificity
which is
benefits.
kind of the point.
So it is
Like,
kind of the point. I mean,
yeah,
along with the tendinous stuff, that's kind of the point.
yeah,
So I do agree. I think that's a fair change. Doing the sub maximally or close to maximal, but not maximal. Less time could be potentially another one, or doing
warming up
like
too, warming up, like
yeah,
building up to
like
it.
or doing like a long one where it's like increasing waves of intensity
The
across the
thing
minute
is
or minute and a
about the
half.
warm up because I think maybe I could have done them if I had done a ton of warm up sets, like regular squats, because we were doing I think 2 by 10
Yeah.
was the warm up for it, and then build up like start at like 50% effort isometrics, but the workouts were already damn near 3 hours.
Yeah, it's like I can't, and that's the other challenge with it is like, what am I gonna do? Have you train for 10 hours? Like, what are we
Yeah,
gonna do? Like, I'm not. Yeah, why not? You red laser your cartilage before we go and do the workout? No, I'm not doing that shit. We don't have time for that. We have real lives. We're not like pro track and field athletes that can just lay around all day in the sun and then wake up and do our 3 sprints every hour and a half.
yeah,
So I think that it's the cost benefit analysis, in my opinion, is heavily weighing in favor of not doing them anymore. And that might be a shock to you guys, but hey, look, anecdote, evidence, all that stuff is valuable, and anecdote is it's erring on the side of we don't need to be doing this anymore.
yeah,
So that's my lens. I think that moving forward, my solution is eccentrics, varying eccentrics, because you get all of those benefits
yeah.
and maybe you have a brief isometric period at the bottom, right? So it's like you lower down, and then you try to hold for one minuscule of a second before you set that weight
Those
down.
ones feel crazy. Like when you're
Mhm.
using a truly supra maximal weight and you try to slow down the very last part of it, it's woo wee
Yeah, it's
hard.
intense. And I've noticed that I feel it more in my tendon than cartilage. Like I did 6 weeks of
They're almost
eccentrics.
analgesic. Like
Yeah, it
if you're at
feels
a
good.
good
Feels
point in your
good.
health, yeah.
And
Like
I
I woke
think
up
the
today
reason why
feeling better.
is, yeah, imagine this, that chicken wing analogy, it's just like a brief second where you're pushing them together really hard versus just pushing them together progressively harder that whole time. Where it's like you're pushing it hard, but you're rolling across,
Yeah,
the joint, and it's like you're spreading that time that force is being applied over a very small interval. So generally, and even then, you get lubrication out of the synovial fluid, out of the cartilage, which I think really,
yeah,
really helps a lot. It helps like lubricate it. It helps load the tendon, and then you also get with the eccentric work, you get crazy increases in type 2 fiber activity. When you're at maximal eccentric work, your type 2 fibers are lit up. They are lit up on maximal eccentrics. And that's
yeah,
just the size principle and rate coding because you're getting such high neural activity between the brain and the muscle. The excitation contraction coupling is maximized and the calcium ion channels are maximized. They have to be
we spread
to
them open.
you just spread them open. The activity is increased dramatically. So you're able to get these really, really high, and there's other reasons why we're stronger eccentrically. But the other thing too is like tendons don't care about what type of activity it is. Doesn't care if you're doing isometric. It doesn't care if you're doing eccentric. Doesn't care if you're doing concentric. What it cares about is time and intensity. That's what it cares about. How long you're doing it and at what effort.
Yeah,
And so when you're doing an eccentric, the forces are so high that the tendon is going to deform. It's going to deform, especially like as you get to these different leverages and you start to shift the weight away from the bone and towards the actual muscle doing work on the tendon. Like the outputs are gonna go up intramuscularly such that the tendon will stretch, especially when you get to those ideal length tension relationships, meaning where you're really, really strong, like you're typically strong at 50% of the length of a muscle. It's because there's the most cross bridging at that point. And that's good. So what we could do is potentially build out that progression a little bit longer, play around with maybe like a 1 second hold at each one, so you go down like a little bit, hold, down a little bit, hold, down a little bit, hold. And I think that's better. And I think that some coaches out there, like I know Natera is big on run specific isometrics, and they'll do time, and then they'll do long holds, and then they'll do more intense waves, but like kind of longer, and then they'll go progressively more intense, and then they'll do RFD ones. I think that stuff's great if you can survive it. It's just that the cartilage, in our experience, we did a lot of prep. We do isometrics every day. Every day we do them, and it still was not sufficient. So that's my lens on it. I closed my case. I'll revisit
so
it.
you're not programming isometrics anymore?
Not for you. Not for the mega elite. I think if if you're not very strong, you don't have problems, yeah, you can do them. But if you're having problems and you're one of our athletes and you haven't programmed and it's maximal, I'm talking 100% pin squat, and there are not many cases where I program that. Maybe 2 cycles ever. Right.
Yeah.
And maybe.
I think, literally 2 cycles.
Yeah. So if you're on one, you probably have been with us for a long time. You're probably listening to this podcast. You can let us know how you feel. If you have a different response, let us know. And I'll be curious to see what the feedback is. But yeah, probably not for most athletes. It's just not fruitful.
Yeah.
It's not fruitful.
All right.
I stand on that.
And all that. If you want us to write your programming, go to THPstrength.com.
If you would like these forward thinkers to write your workouts, these forward thinking, intelligent individuals,
these chaps,
these young chaps, go to THPstrength.com. There's like a 20% discount probably. I don't even know anymore. What is it?
There is
20% discount
for the January month, the new year.
So thank you guys.
I feel motivated. Actually, we're past what the day of when people quit. Are we past that day?
Yeah, dude. International Quitters Day.
When was that?
The 7th, I think. It was Satyar's birthday.
So if you're not an international,
might have been the 9th. Let me check.
We should change what the sale says to International Quitters Day sale. International Quitters Week. We're in International Quitters Week. Right
the second Friday of the year. Second Friday of the year. So that is, let's see. Well, it's a little bit different because that would have been the first Friday was the 3rd, the 10th, last Friday. National Quitters Day.
So if you woke up and worked out this week, congratulations. You're better than 90% of the human population.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. But thank you guys for listening. We will see you guys tomorrow on the podcast because we do this every day because we're committed.
And we're not quitters. We're not international quitters.
We're not quitters. And Isaiah and I are going to start podcasting more in person. So if you want to see more in-person podcasts, make sure you tell us in the comment section. And yeah, we'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.
Bye-bye.